This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
So when I was managing the Korean brand, it was really during that period of time when K-pop started becoming popular. Now, many of you may remember the show, but may not remember the year. There was a particular drama that took Southeast Asia by storm. Okay, it was Winter Sonata. Now that I mentioned the name, I'm sure many of you will remember the name, but you may not remember the date, right? And suddenly, because of that one single drama, Korean culture and Korean products started to become cool and sexy. And you can suddenly feel that people are coming to us because now the Korean feels cool. Now, why I mention that is because now you kind of feel the same thing happening again, right? After K-pop, now we are starting to see the rise of C-pop, right? Okay. Chinese drama, Chinese singer, Chinese culture, they are starting to become cool. They are starting to become popular as well. And I do see this C-pop wave probably bring up a lot of these Chinese automotive brands, like what K-pop did for the Korean brands 20 over years ago.
Welcome to COE Watch, and we're witnessing the rise of Chinese car brands. In case you missed the signs, BYD is leading the sales chart in Singapore, and others are coming. As I found out from my industry expert, it seems to have to do with Hai Di Lao, Luckin Coffee, and the popularity of C-dramas. Now, beside being a purveyor of pop culture, Dr. Victor Kwan has been a motor trader for more than 20 years. He has negotiated with manufacturers and run multi-brand dealerships from the mass-market car brands to the absolute pinnacle in the luxury segment. Having left the industry recently, he is now a senior lecturer at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Hello, Victor.
Hi, Nian. Thanks for inviting me here. As you've mentioned in your introduction, I was in the automotive industry for nearly 25 years, quarter of a century actually, and have managed over the years many different kind of brands, all the way from mass market to premium and luxury or even ultra luxury, right? So spent many years there and decided to go full-time academia with SUSS recently.
Mm-hmm. And so during that time, I mean, as in the motor trade, you've seen the rise and fall of different brands and all that. I want to find out from you, what is your opinion of Chinese brands and Chinese electric vehicles in particular?
Okay, now earlier on in my career, right, when I was managing in the mass market segment, Korean brand was actually one of my first brand I have to head up the entire business, right? So that was in the early 2000s. 2001, 2002. And it was actually quite interesting at the time because when I started managing Korean brand, they were kind of viewed as a poorer cousin to the Japanese back then, right? But I was also very fortunate at the time because if you recall back, J-pop was the talk of the town, yes, for many years. And K-pop was kind of coming up, but not really there yet, right? So when I was managing the Korean brand, it was really during that period of time when K-pop started becoming popular. Now, many of you may remember the show, but may not remember the year. K-pop was up and coming, but not really popular until there was a particular drama that took Southeast Asia by storm. Okay, it was Winter Sonata. Now that I mentioned the name, I'm sure many of you will remember the name, but you may not remember the date, right? It was around 2002, 2003 that Winter Sonata came up, and it was very popular in Southeast Asia. And suddenly, because of that one single drama, Korean culture and Korean products started to become cool and sexy, right? Now, to give the whole K-pop thingy another boost, about 2 years after Winter Sonata, there was another hit drama, right? Can't really remember the English name. I think it was like Tjoe in the Kingdom. The Chinese name was Da Changqing. Okay, now that I mentioned the Chinese name, you'll probably remember now. That was another big hit as well. And the whole K-pop culture actually just continued from there. Right, and I was managing Korean brand, and you can suddenly feel that people are coming to us because now the Korean feels cool. Now, why I mention that is because now you kind of feel the same thing happening again, right? as I mentioned earlier as well, the Chinese brands started coming in actually about 20 years ago.
Yes.
We had Cherry, we had QQ, we have Geely as well, as in the Geely brand, right?
Yes.
And a few other, there's another brand I remember was commercial vehicle Wuling,
Yes.
which actually came in at a time. They came for a few years when COE prices was low, they did well for a while, but didn't really last very long. Right, maybe because of the COE quota and all these things, right? But they didn't really last very long. And design, they were okay, not fantastic. And Chinese products didn't really feel cool at the time. Now, forward 20 years. After K-pop, now we are starting to see the rise of C-pop, right?
Okay.
Chinese drama, Chinese singer, Chinese culture, they are starting to become cool. They are starting to become popular as well. And I do see this C-pop wave probably bring up a lot of these Chinese automotive brands like what K-pop did for the Korean brands 20 over years ago.
So, I mean, that's really interesting in how you connect this cultural or pop culture to actually our consumer habits, right? Consumption and their preferences. Is this also a reason? So on one side, yes, you have people are more receptive to it, but it's also, is there a reason why? Is that the reason why we see a new Chinese EV or a new Chinese brand being launched in Singapore? It feels like every other week there's a new one.
Obviously, there are a couple of reasons behind this. First thing is, compared to 20 over years ago, there are much more Chinese automotive brands these days. Right? I was in Shanghai Motor Show last year, and it's like there are brands that you have not heard before. The entire exhibition hall was full of Chinese EV brands. So there are a lot more Chinese brands that are available now. Okay, and that together with the drive for cleaner energy cars in Singapore resulted in many of these brands being launched here. So it's actually more of a function of availability.
But it's also like, I get a sense that from your perspective, when you were a motor trader exploring brands to bring in, you say you see so many brands at a motor show, for example. Do they look credible? Like, do they think that they will fit to the Singapore consumer's preference?
Not every one of them, because a lot of the brands are only available in left-hand drive.
Okay.
That's one. Number two is there are so many available, it can possibly bring everyone in, because a lot of these brands may be quite well known in China, but not in this part of the world. So left-hand drive is one. Some of them really doesn't feel credible enough at this stage of their development to have a business case to bring them into the local market.
So let's look at the one that is the shiniest one, the one that's in the lead, right? That's BYD, right? Build your dreams.
Yep.
In your opinion, right, is it an anomaly of what BYD is doing and have been achieving? Or is it like the beginning, the first of many of this sort of brands that will come in and take over every single piece of COE out there, in other words?
I won't say BYD is an anomaly. I think BYD statistically it's quite well known, right? BYD is probably the first Chinese brand that has gained critical mass here in Singapore. Some has tried in the past, didn't really gain that kind of mass, but BYD is the first one, right? I won't say that that's an anomaly. That could be actually the first of a trend. Now, how far this trend may go, it really depends on the product availability, the attractiveness of the brand, the market reception, and many other factors, right? But that actually may start a trend. Yeah.
So if we say that the trend has started, why or how does this trend start? I mean, we talk about, besides having Chinese pop culture in this, what is BYD doing right or really well to get to this position of critical mass besides being first?
Well, quality for one would have improved a lot. I mean, not just Chinese automotive product, right? A lot of other Chinese product, their quality compared to 10, 20 years ago has improved a lot. So I think that will play a part, right? The other thing is design as well. Like I mentioned, 20 years ago when the Chinese brands like Geely, Cherry first came into the market, they were not ugly, but probably they were not the sexiest one around.
Not pretty, yeah.
But these days, when you really look at a BYD or a few other Chinese brands, design has really caught up with any other brands, right? And the appeal is there, the attractiveness is there, and of course, pricing. Right, but it is difficult. It is difficult to talk too much about pricing now because in general COE prices are high. Right,
yeah.
So whatever car that you want to buy, is actually not like cheap. Right, but the thing is that I think the Chinese brand compared to the rest of the brand are still very competitively priced.
So you talk about price in the absolute sense, or is it value? Because one thing to I often struggle with or think about is that the same product not just that cheap equals good, because as you said, COE is very high, COE premium is high, things are very expensive. So either way, the cheapest thing in town is still a lot of money. So the person who buying it has high expectation that it gives him or her the value. Do you think that these cars now, these Chinese cars, BYD in particular, do they give the kind of value that you go, this is actually as good as or better than your Japanese, than your European offerings?
Value plays an important part as well. I think it's both. It's more of the absolute price. Of course. Because when you really take out your calculator and make your math, right, and then do your math, absolute price plays a part, right? In terms of value, definitely for the same price, they are offering for a lower price. They are actually offering a better product with more features compared to other competitors, right? But when I was managing a Korean brand way back in the days, we also try to market a lot on value. It does help, but to some extent, you cannot stretch it too much, right? The absolute price is still the most important thing.
So the start is the price, then the value proposition of why you should get it, not just because it's so-called cheap, relatively speaking. I want to ask about, still on BYD, because I think it's such an interesting topic, right? Is that, how does it really work though? Because locally, I went to ask around and search, right? BYD is sold by one authorized distributor, but they have multiple dealers, right? I mean, traditionally in Singapore for the past 20 years, the majority of dealerships are set up as quite monogamous. You got one shop and everyone goes to this one shop. Now you have one shop with many representatives. Out there I counted, I think there were, 5, 6, 7 locations where you can find, you can take your wallet out and buy a BYD. You know, that's not usual. And add to that, every week there's a roadshow at your favorite or your unknown suburban mall carrying a BYD flag. So is it also, does this matter, having point of sales, having exposure, being aware of the brand being around?
When the brand is new, having such awareness and exposure in multiple locations, as many as possible, definitely will help the brand. But such a strategy, in my opinion, in a small market like Singapore, will hit a saturation point. Right? Now, BYD is adopting a business model that is not common in Singapore, though it's almost a given in any other market. But because of our geographic size and our market size, right, a real multi-dealer approach is not the first, but it's not common. Right? For example, we have BMW doing that. We have Mercedes doing that some years ago, right? In fact, if you go further back, you have Chevrolet doing that as well.
Yes.
But in general, having a multi-dealer business model will reach a saturation point where initially you may have a big growth. Yeah. And later it will kind of taper off. The growth will reach a steady state. And when you have reached a steady state and you have too many locations, it's difficult to make sure everybody has a business case to run after a period of time. Simply, it is nothing to do with the brand. It's simply because our market size is just too small. And our geographic size is small as well. It's like, look, if I am going to make such a major decision to buy a car that costs me $100,000 to $200,000, if I stay in the east and you tell me to drive to the west, I will do that. Because after all, this is one of the biggest decisions I'm going to make over the next 10 years, right? So it really, Singapore is small. It doesn't mean that you need to have a showroom in every single part.
So if on this point of saturation point that you have, you can get to east and west of the country in less than 40 minutes and so on, then what can happen? Say we reach saturation point. Will you think that maybe roadshows you can cut back, but what about the dealers that you have appointed? I mean, this is not, of course, not unique to them. We know that there are also other brands that are appointing, whether at arm's length or actual, to sell the brands elsewhere. Do you think that you have to drop then? Because then the business case is weakened?
Yeah, when you reach a saturation point where your volume growth start tapering off, all the dealers that you have appointed or all the different locations that you have set up, some may tend to struggle. Some may tend to struggle. This is what we have seen in the past as well. You may reach a point where you need to consolidate a little bit. Well, but for BYD at this point in time, they have not reached that stage yet. I think things are still looking rosy for everybody. But it will reach a time where some consolidation may have to happen, unless they really beat all expectations and continue growing at the pace that they are growing, right? But we'll never know. We assume, like most brands, it will hit a saturation point. Then that's when consolidation has to happen.
Okay, I want to hang on to this thought on saturation, but not just for one brand, but for other Chinese brands. But we'll come back to it in a little bit. But now to just talk about as this star, this Chinese brand that is growing so quickly. Not so long ago, we used to talk about Japanese cars. As you've said, Korean cars actually, and then before that was Japanese cars. So what is going on in the marketplace now if the Chinese are getting more and more traction in the market? Where does it leave the Korean brands? And then where does it leave the Japanese brands?
So when the Korean was making headways, everybody was asking what happened happened to the Japanese brand. But look, 20 years down the road, the Japanese brands are still well established with a foothold in Singapore. Well, especially in Singapore, the market size is controlled. Right?
This is because of the COE quota.
Because of the COE quota. So there's a mathematical formula that is public information, no secret about it. Right? So it's a fixed market size that may fluctuate from year to year, but it's always cyclical. Right?
Okay.
So if the market size is fixed, any brands that are growing, whether it's a Chinese or any other country of origin, will have to take their lunch from somebody else. Right?
Yes.
It has to take from somebody else. It's a zero-sum game.
Yep.
So naturally, just based on this mathematical logic, somebody wins, somebody has to lose.
So who are losing now? I'm giving you the evil eye now.
Now, when you talk about the Chinese brand, essentially we are just talking about the mass market segment, right?
Yes.
So if one brand in the mass market segment gains, another brand in the mass market segment has to lose. And
this might be multiple because I'm going to go a bit deeper here because yes, the quota is fixed, but the composition, the mix can change.
Yes,
right?
it can change.
Big cars or rather premium brands, mass market brands, and now we're talking about Japanese brands, Korean brands, even German brands. So may not be one brand that is suffering.
It may be a few.
Who are the losers? Just from the brand's perspective.
From the brand perspective, it will likely be the Japanese actually.
So with the rise of BYD, how strongly it's growing, is it also, we're now talking about brands being compromised, will be the really popular Japanese brands, the Toyotas, the Hondas, the Nissans?
It is possible, but I'm always very careful about saying that. Why? Now, for the time being, it seems that the Japanese are losing some ground, mainly because they don't have a good offering of full electric vehicle.
Yes.
But with some recent development, more and more people seems to agree that maybe hybrid is a good middle ground. Now, the Japanese are very strong in hybrid. So if this thing about hybrid may be a good middle ground rather than jumping straight into full electric, then the Japanese will have a strong product lineup or product offer. Right? That can also turn things a little bit.
A little bit means it's not a clear U-turn.
Yeah, it may be a clear U-turn. That means the tide may change, right? If more and more people are realizing that hybrid is a middle ground.
But, right, I'm going to use your words against you. You said prices. It's one of those big things followed by value.
Yep.
Now, the design of the current incentive schemes that are doled out for electric cars, pure electric cars just have a head start in terms of getting a really attractive price.
Yep.
I mean, out there, I did a bit of research. I found that there's a brand called Aeon, A-I-O-N.
Yep.
The Aeon ES, right, is cheaper on list price than a traditional internal combustion engine car. Any internal combustion engine car will be more expensive than this electric car. So in this regard, the incentives kind of is biased towards the EVs. Consumers being price sensitive, the hybrids will be, in that sense, more expensive.
More expensive.
Do you think that it's still strong enough then?
But there's still one variable in the equation you didn't put in. Is if you drive a full electric car, charging is a whole lifestyle change. Right? Okay. So, yes, the electric vehicle may be much more competitively priced versus the hybrid or the ICE. But there is a big consideration about buying a full EV is that first thing, you must have charger available, you must have charger easily accessible by you as and when you need it. Essentially, if you drive an electric car, I think your whole lifestyle may have to adjust, right? Depending what time which day of the week I have to go and charge, how do I plan my day around charging my car. Obviously, if you have a charger at home, it's a different story. But for those who doesn't, then you do need to replan your lifestyle a little bit. So, if the price difference between a hybrid and an EV is there but not significant, bearable, then some of this lifestyle consideration may swing one way to the other. One guy may say, actually, if I look near to my house, there are no charger available, and it may be a bit too troublesome. Then I probably will pay a bit more for hybrid, right? But for that guy who say, no, just downstairs, my house, there is a charger
office,
that is usually nobody using, then that can swing the other way.
But as you're saying all this, I'm thinking of the appliances that we're familiar with at home, right? The age of the Japanese TV became replaced by the Korean TVs, and now this is the part that's a bit like it was either Chinese TVs or a certain Singaporean brand, right? I mean, we all know. Thing is, when you're exposed to let's take the middle ground. When we move from Japanese TVs to Korean TVs, and you go, these Korean TVs really deliver what I want. I don't need a Japanese TV anymore. If now, as we continue this whole acceleration in the adoption of EVs, more and more people have already gotten into EVs. They're used to this, as you've raised the charging, the perceived, whether it's inconvenience or where it fits my lifestyle is now EV adaptable. Then I might not go back to, I don't need to go back to hybrids and all the conveniences because my life now I don't need that anymore. Is there a risk of that?
True. But if we go along this line of discussion, right, there's another major stakeholder that needs to come in, charging infrastructure.
Yes.
And whoever builds it and runs it, right? A lot of it also will have to depend. Okay, so for more people to become EV adaptable, like how you put it, right, the number of charging points has to increase to be so convenient that most people can get adapted to it.
Yes.
And then the other question will be whether we will have enough charging points that will be built up in time. I know the Singapore government target is 60,000 charging points by 2030. We probably have about 14,000 now. We may be there or we may fall short a little bit. That we really do not know. There are still many stakeholders involved in this.
Fair.
So yes, if the number of charging points does continue to increase exponentially, then yes, more and more people will be EV adaptable, and then that swing will happen even faster. But if the number of charging points doesn't increase like what we need it to, then it may not happen so soon, right?
Here I have to admit I'm trying to catch you out. Because of this. BYD has announced a really, really solid hybrid. Claims to do 1,000 kilometers. So I'm sure they can do 1,000, they can do a 900 kilometer or a more normal hybrid, which is going into, again, the Japanese brands. Right? So they can get into that place, that space where the Japanese are good at. They can do their version too. What's your take? Is that a realistic, a plausible risk if you would be, working with Japanese brands?
Oh yeah. If BYD or any other of the Chinese brands, because I understand that Maxus has one like that too, right?
Yes.
That is kind of like a hybrid. It can do 1,000 over kilometers.
Yeah, can you imagine 1,000 kilometers?
And when I look at the video clip, you are only required to pump petrol like once a year. for the Maxus, right?
Wait, are Chinese years also 12 months long? Like the rest of us?
I assume it's it's not the lunar calendar or whatever. But once a year, So when you have product like this, Chinese hybrid, and not only that, you only need to pump petrol once a year, then it's a very radical change.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, then they will really be competing right on the turf where the Japanese are good, and the whole dynamic will change again. It will change. But who knows? Then let me catch you back on the other way. The Japanese may also be introducing their own EV soon.
Yes.
Right? And then take share away from BYD. So it can happen both ways.
Okay, now I want to tap on your experience making business cases for different brands that you want to introduce. In this case, when you work in planning, in shopping or wooing these brands to come in, what kind of timelines do you work with in terms of like, we need to make money within how many years, or is it how many months, and how long to be in this game for with this brand? What kind of consideration do you take on board?
Normally, when we're pitching for new brands or working with new partners, right, to bring in a brand, the business plan, both sides will always agree to do is 5 years.
5 years.
Okay. And most of the time, we will project by the end of third, fourth year, we should be starting to make some money, That's the usual business plan we will do. But in my personal opinion, with all sorts of uncertainties in the world, not just now, but forever, we always have to live with uncertainties, right? Sometimes doing a 5-year business plan, to me, is often too long, right? Things may turn out very different. A lot of things can change in that 5 years. So whatever business plan we do may not be the case. May not the actual scenario may not happen to be that case.
But I'm thinking that for consumers then, we don't have the luxury of, let me buy this car and see 3, 4, 5 years later that this will work. How should we shop then as a consumer if I were to approach a relatively new brand? Should I do the wait out for the next, for my neighbor to buy one and see that if his car is not broken down before I make the leap myself?
Yeah, I mean, if I really put on the consumer mindset,
now that you're you're out of motor trade, right? You can talk like a human being again.
It's not just automotive choice, right? Any other things that we buy, whether it's a mobile phone or whatever, you tend, at least for me, I try not to be the first few to do it. And especially when buying a car where it's a pretty big financial commitment, I will tend to wait out. I will tend to wait out to see more on the road. I wouldn't want to be one of the first, to try it out. But that's me. Other consumer may be different. They may be more adventurous. I know of friends who like to try out new brands, but before trying out, they will also read a lot of other reviews and how this brand is doing in other international markets.
Right? Fair. So it's research, but also a bit cautious.
A bit cautious, yeah.
You mentioned about seeing enough of them on the road. So in your experience, both, really as from the industry and also just as a consumer yourself, what kind of numbers do you need before you and I start spotting the cars on the road?
Good question. Great question. We ever did nothing overly scientific, but there are some statistics involved. In Singapore, you need about 400 on the road.
So 400 of that brand, that
model, before you can see it almost every day on the road.
They will stick like you will register.
You will register.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's about 400.
Wait, unscientifically, how unscientific is this? Is it just asking a table around coffee?
No, it's just based on our own observations. We did this years ago for our own brand, or even for other brands as well. Being in the business, right? You drive on the car every day. You drive on the road every day. You will tend to look at all the cars around you, and you are aware which were the models that were just launched. Okay, and then it starts to register in you. Hey, this new brand, new model. I'm starting to see it every day on the road. And then when you go back to the LTA figure, you realize that. So when you do this enough time, you always realize that once they have registered and put on the road 300 to 400 units, you start to feel it every day.
And then when you feel it, this is exciting because when you feel that, okay, this brand, this model is legit, right? There are 400 odd, you and I are seeing the cars now. Would that give you enough assurance? Now, consumer, does it give you enough assurance that, now that you start seeing the car on the road, 400 buyers can't be wrong? Is that the point when you start thinking?
Yes. It's very important. Visibility on the road gives a lot of confidence, right?
In terms of your own personal decision,
in terms of your own personal decision. A lot of it is, as long as you see this product being used on the road every day, okay, you start to feel that it's legit. And you are more willing to trust and to take that risk. In fact, many years ago, I did a research on word of mouth for my dissertation. At that time, I wanted to do something slightly different. For a lack of a better word at that time, to me, being able to see a certain product being used is a very powerful, like a word of mouth, except it's not word, it's visual.
Yes.
Right? I wanted to invent some funny terms like, word of eyes.
Okay.
To really study the topic of visibility of it being used. The power is as strong as positive word of mouth for a certain product.
This is in the context of car buying is when you're on the street at the junction and you see across.
Yeah. It's not just about car buying. It's like a new mobile phone, for example. When you see more and more people using it, those products when that person is using and is visible, the visibility is as important as word of mouth.
So just by experiencing,
just by seeing people
experiencing someone experiencing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not just about product. It's also about fashion trend. You realize, how did a certain fashion trend become a trend? It's when you start to see people wearing a certain kind of clothes or in a certain way, and it just catch on.
I'm connecting that to this thing with back to how BYD is catching on.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, they're way past 400. Right?
Way past.
Way past. Each
pass
color.
it in a month.
Actually, they're about 500 plus in July.
I
but
know.
So does this also support the idea that they will continue to accelerate if they don't, if nothing too big, too drastic, too dramatic happens, they will continue on this path because you and I on the street, it's no longer a point of like, oh, I spotted one.
No.
It's almost like a hygiene factor. The roads feel a bit different if you don't have a BYD.
Yeah. Yes. Like I say, in the last 18 to 24 months, you see it every day. You see many every day. And they have gained, because of that, the brand has gained a lot of credibility, trust, and success just breeds success, right? That's how it actually works. I mean, this is exactly when I was managing the Korean brand, when it was relatively new, not many on the road. People don't really trust it. But the first 500, 600, 700, 1,000 cars, even if you don't make a lot of money, you need to put them on the road. And our experience shows that once it is on the road, you become a legit accepted brand.
A player.
Yeah, a serious player.
Yeah.
Then it will just snowball from there. Yeah.
Okay. You touched on something that caught my ears here, which is this thing of make less money. I always want to know from usually reformed motor traders, how much does the motor trade make out of a car anyway? Where are these sources of income in selling their car? To the consumer, whoa, this car is very expensive, but we know that quite a big chunk of it is COE. Quite a big chunk of it is tax. So where does the income of a car dealer come from? The profits, the margins. Where's it coming from? Yeah.
Yes, it's a very common misconception because OMV or the import value figures are publicly available here.
Yes, this is the basic cost of the car before
so
tax.
They will take OMV and then they will multiply the tax. They will put in some miscellaneous costs and they less off from selling price of the car.
Yes.
And then they assume that dealers make a lot of margin out of this car. But there's a lot of other important things that they miss out. Like, for example, many of our brands here, right, the dealer are not the importer. There is an OEM importer here.
Yes.
So they are the one who import at this value. But eventually when they sell that car to the dealer, it's another value.
So what the OMV or the base value and all the taxes is not what the dealer actually pays as a cost of the product.
Yes, it's not what
they pay a little bit more.
They pay a lot more.
A lot more.
For some of the cases, for some of the brands, they actually pay a lot more. So whatever is the common miscalculation and assuming that the dealer makes so much money is actually way lesser than that because there is this import function by the OEM that people not in the business will not know, right? And there are also many other costs involved, okay? Besides, like, for example, your PDI costs, your transportation costs,
these are the costs
polishing costs
incurred to prepare the car
for delivery, okay? There are marketing costs as well. Some will argue that marketing costs should go as a variable cost with each car sold. Some will argue that it's a fixed cost, depending on how you do your accounting. But there are all these huge costs involved as well. And your showroom, your depreciation. So there are many other costs that the general public, not in the business, you will not be aware, right?
Okay.
So once you less off all these things, the margin that is remaining is actually not a lot. Right. Now, what will make some money is if you take an in-house insurance, if you take in-house financing, or if you trade in a used car, so that there is another inventory.
So that's the trinity that dealers love.
We call it the FIT.
Yes, finance, insurance,
and
trade-in.
Right?
Yes, FIT.
So it's really, you have to look at it like a value chain income. Selling the car is just one part of the value chain. The margin is definitely not as much as what is nowhere near to what a lot of people think. But then you have all this value chain like finance, insurance, and trade-in that comes in. That eventually, when you put all these things together, obviously it will lead to a viable business case for the dealers.
Okay, so I want to ask this F, I, and T.
Yep.
Right? I want to get a fitness check here.
Yeah.
So, would it be right to assume that I will be the smallest? Insurance, earnings from insurance will be the smallest.
I will be the smallest, but keep in mind that T can be negative as well if you make the wrong choice. Or you make the wrong
offer.
Purchase value, yeah.
Okay, so here we're talking about trade-ins as the when I buy a car,
Yep.
I give in my old car to trade in. The dealer that I'm buying the new car from might offer me too much for what I.
Yep.
Then you make a loss on
Then
the
you will
trade-in.
make a loss, yep.
Okay, so then that leaves F, I, and T. I is low, T is a risk. I guess it's F then. It's not quite algebra, but I can manage. So
F is
finance,
important, yeah.
So
Finance
F is important.
yeah.
Significant? How significant?
It can be significant.
Is it going to be more than anything else in the whole cost build-up? More than how much you make off the car? Is what I'm asking.
It actually depends on brand to brand, because keep in mind, one thing about F, it also, or rather F,
Finance,
right?
Yes. Language.
One thing about finance is that it also depends on what brand you are selling. Because if you're selling the more premium and the luxury brand, the loan quantum is way higher and your finance commission will be more. But having said that, this bunch of customers may also not
have their own sources of
they
finance.
have own sources of financing. So the amount of commission that you make from finance varies significantly from brand to brand because of depending on your selling price.
But
right?
would it be fair that yes, a high-end expensive car, you get the commission, the percentage, and all that will be one vary, but also you still make more from the fact that it's a high-end expensive car.
The loan quantum can be higher.
Yeah, the loan quantum is higher, but also the markup on the branded product has to be higher than a mass product, right?
It has to be for one very...
So it adds up, right? You sell a more expensive car,
yes,
they borrow more money, you get more commission,
yes,
so you make even more.
Yes, but keep in mind, we always complicate our own life, right? Volume of premium brand or luxury brand will tend to be way lower. So you do have to make more from each car to be able to cover all your overheads. Because while the volume is way lower, your showroom size, your air conditioning, your number of test drive car may not be lesser.
Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah, so it kind of like, not that it evens out, I'm sure, even though you are now reformed, you have gone to the brighter side, from the dealership's perspective, there is some challenges still.
There are challenges, yeah.
Right, and this is
obviously,
whether you're a mass or not.
Yeah, there are different kind of challenges.
So we covered quite a lot of ground today, talking about Chinese EVs, new brands, and whatnot. But what stick with me is this. You mentioned about Winter Sonata and all that, and now we are on this C-pop that is coming. Do you think that this change, right, this tide, will it, change again, go back to before? Going to before when mass markets, when we have Japanese brands, when they are Korean brands, or Chinese brands are here to stay. Number of Chinese brands to be confirmed. Would that be a more likely situation? Which one would you vote?
I think Chinese brands are here to stay. The amount of foothold that the Chinese brand, mainly BYD, has gained in the market over the last, 1 to 2 years is pretty significant. Okay, once you gain a foothold, you gain legitimacy, you gain trust, and that's very powerful. Okay, so I do think that Chinese brands are here to stay. Like many other things in the world, right? The Chinese are legitimate in many, many things, or even better. So they are here to stay. So I don't think they'll be going anywhere soon. But not every Chinese brand will make it, right?
Yes.
Just like many years ago, not every Korean brand will make it, right? Even though there was way lesser Korean brand compared to the number of Chinese brands we have now. But in general, Chinese as a car manufacturer has gained a foothold in the Singapore market. All these changes are not unexpected. Industry change all the time, right? I mean, we are talking about big transformative change, right? The main advice I will give is that the car business, specifically here in Singapore, only Singapore, because of the COE system, is very cyclical. It's very cyclical. You must be able to ride the high and the lows, right? There will be great years because COE quota is plentiful. There will also be very tough years, very lean years, like what we have seen in the last couple of years, right? You must be able to ride the cycle up and down, okay? But to some extent, the good news is because of the revalidation trend, the revalidation of COE trend that has been happening over the last few years, this cycle, the peaks and the troughs, will be flattened somewhat. This is just based on pure mathematics, right? It will be flattened somewhat, but it will still be cyclical.
Cyclical, but not so severe.
Not
the swings
so severe,
are not so big.
yes. The swings are not so big, but there will still be swings. So to build a career, to write the business in the automotive business here, right? You will have to be able to write.
So
bit of a roller
parting
coaster.
short is you need stamina.
You need stamina, you need resilience, and you need to be able to spot the right trend.
Okay, that's actually kind of think of it as kind of a career advice for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah. No. But not every industry is as cyclical as the car business. Car business is because it's inbuilt into the system by COE quota. No other business has
so
quota.
the 3 words of wisdom here is
resilience, stamina, and also be able to spot trend.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Kwan.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap for COE Watch, a podcast by the Straits Times. I'm your host, Niantjoel. If you resonate with the points raised, do share this podcast episode with your friends and family. If you would like to read more of my transport articles, there is a link in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening.
Send your feedback to podcast@sph.com.sg. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or within our Straits Times app. Thanks for listening.